-40 degrees, no heating system, no insulated walls, no weatherproof jacket, no way to order food to your door. Just you, a small group of people, and whatever you managed to prepare before the cold arrived. This was winter for ancient humans in northern latitudes. Not occasionally, every year. For hundreds of thousands of years. And they survived it. Not by luck, not by being tougher than us. By being smarter than most people give them credit for. The first problem was shelter, and the solution was not caves. The popular image of ancient humans huddled in caves is mostly wrong. Caves were used, but they were not the primary solution because caves are rare, unevenly distributed, often already occupied by animals considerably larger and more dangerous than humans. The real shelter innovation was constructed. Structures built from whatever the environment provided. In the mammoth steppe of Ice Age Europe and Siberia, where trees were scarce, ancient humans built shelters from mammoth bones, entire structures, frameworks of interlocked tusks and leg bones, covered with hides. These were not temporary arrangements thrown together in desperation. Archaeologists who excavate them find evidence of long-term habitation, ash layers from repeated fires, food remains, tools left and returned to. People lived in these structures through multiple winters. They were homes, built from the bones of animals they had killed, in an environment that offered almost nothing else to build with. In forested regions, the approach was different. Branches, bark, mud, packed tightly enough to stop wind. What mattered was not the material, it was the principle. Stop the wind, trap body heat. Create a microclimate inside that bore no relationship to what was happening outside. A well-constructed ancient shelter could maintain a temperature significantly above freezing, even when the outside air was lethal. Not through any heat source beyond a fire and the bodies of the people inside it. Just insulation and design. Fire was the absolute center of winter survival, not as a luxury, as a non-negotiable. And keeping fire alive through an ancient winter was not as simple as it sounds. You need fuel, constantly. In northern winters, gathering fuel became a daily survival task. Dead wood, dried dung in treeless regions, bone fat, which burned surprisingly well, and was used as fuel across the ancient world. But the more urgent problem was keeping fire alive when conditions worked against it. Wind, moisture. The simple reality that fire goes out if nobody tends it. Ancient humans developed fire keeping as a specific skill. Embers buried in ash to hold heat through the night. Small, slow-burning arrangements designed to last with minimal attention. Fire carried in clay containers when groups moved. Letting the fire die in deep winter was not an inconvenience. It was potentially fatal. The difference between a group that maintained fire through a hard winter and one that lost, it could be the difference between survival and death. Fire was treated accordingly, with the seriousness of something that lives could depend on, because they did. Clothing was the second major innovation, and it was more sophisticated than most people imagine. The oldest direct evidence of clothing comes from genetic studies of body lice. Body lice, which live in clothing rather than directly on the skin, diverged from head lice at a specific point in evolutionary history. That divergence dates to approximately 170,000 years ago, meaning humans were wearing enough clothing to sustain a separate louse population at least 170,000 years ago, probably longer. The clothing itself is gone. Organic material rarely survives that long. But the lice remember what those clothes looked like. We can only infer from later evidence. Needles made from bone appear in the archaeological record around 50,000 years ago. Fine needles, capable of producing tight-stitched seams, Not rough-wrapped hides draped over shoulders, tailored clothing cut to fit the body, stitched clothes to trap air and block wind. The difference between a loose hide and a fitted stitched garment in extreme cold is enormous. Loose hides let cold air in at every gap. Fitted, layered, stitched clothing creates pockets of trapped warm air. The same principle that makes modern cold weather gear effective. Ancient humans figured this out and encoded it in the design of their tools. A bone needle, 50,000 years old, is not a primitive object. It is evidence of a sophisticated understanding of insulation. Food presented its own winter problem. In summer and autumn, food was relatively accessible. In deep winter, almost everything disappeared. Animals became scarce or dormant, plants died back. The landscape offered almost nothing. The solution was preparation. Ancient humans cached food before winter arrived: dried meat, smoked fish, frozen carcasses in cold climates where the environment itself served as a refrigerator. Berries and roots processed and stored. Fat rendered and preserved. This was not casual. It was systematic. A group that arrived at winter without adequate stores faced a very hard calculation. How long can we survive on what we have? How far can we travel to find more? What can we sacrifice to give the most vulnerable members of the group the best chance? These were not abstract questions. They were the actual decisions ancient humans made around actual fires in actual winters. And the evidence suggests they often made them well, because they survived. There is one more survival strategy that rarely gets discussed. Other people. Winter survival in extreme cold is significantly easier in a group than alone. Bodies generate heat. More bodies in a small enclosed space means more shared warmth. Shared labor means the fuel-gathering burden is distributed rather than falling on one exhausted person. Shared knowledge means if one person knows something about surviving this specific winter, everyone benefits. Shared food means the risk of a bad hunt falls on the group rather than destroying a single family. The social structure of ancient human groups was not just cultural, it was thermal. People slept together for warmth in ways that modern humans, with their heated houses and individual beds, have largely abandoned. Multiple bodies under shared hides. Close physical contact not as intimacy, but as survival strategy. A person who was isolated in deep winter was a person in serious danger. The group was not just emotionally important in winter, it was physiologically necessary. Ice Age humans expanded into latitudes that modern humans without technology could not survive. They lived through climate periods colder than anything most humans experience today. They did it without Gore-Tex, without central heating, without preserved food from a grocery store. They did it with bone needles and mammoth bone shelters and carefully tended fires and the accumulated knowledge of every winter that came before. Knowledge passed down through generations, not written, demonstrated, practiced, shared. Every technique for surviving a northern winter was once discovered by someone who had no prior knowledge to fall back on, who figured it out through trial and error in conditions that did not offer many chances to get it wrong, and then taught it to the people around them, so no one else had to learn it that way. Basically, ancient humans survived freezing winters the same way they survived everything else, together, and smarter than we give them credit for.